Good afternoon, and welcome back to our town hall series, which we started just about a year ago right now in response to COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdown. And we had such a great response to those initial town hall meetings and the opportunities to hear from partners on a variety of issues. We have decided to continue them. We took a break for the conference, which hopefully you were able to participate in a couple of weeks ago, but we are now back. We're on a new platform, the same one that we used during the conference. So hopefully you will find the town hall experience enhanced even further. So thank you for joining us. Today we are going to hear about Green Schoolyards Initiative and how chorus can play a larger role in rolling that out. The Green Schoolyards Initiative started about 4 years ago between the National League of Cities and the Children of Nature Network, and is designed to transform asphalt schoolyards into green spaces where children can learn and play. They benefit the students, the communities, and the environment. And the Green Schoolyards Initiative is rolling out a training and technical assistance program to help more communities and school systems implement these important programs in their communities. And we'd love to hear more about how chorus can participate in that. So before we go there, however, it's been an exciting couple weeks at Core Network. As you may know, we had a great conference, had over 900 registered participants, so thank you if you participated in that. Also yesterday we learned that the President Biden has an included $10 billion investment in the Civilian Climate Corps Initiative in his infrastructure plan. So we are anxiously awaiting details of the role that CORE's existing network of COREs can play in that initiative. And we're also continuing to take a stance against racism and violence. And we recently put out a statement against recent cases of violence against Asian American and Pacific Islanders and the mass shootings that have gone on across the country. So there's a statement. I hope you will take a look and join us in our fight against racism and to protect people of all backgrounds. So moving on with our town hall. We're anxious to hear more about the Green Schoolyards Initiative and the role that chorus can play, and I'm going to pass it over to our friend and colleague Priya Cook from Children Nature Network to get us started. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. We are delighted to join you today, and I welcome everyone who's out there. Again, as someone genuinely excited about today's topic due to my firsthand experience with the power of core programs. I served as an SCA crew leader in my home city of DC and in Alaska. And my core experience helped lead me to the work I do today as a Green Schoolyards consultant for Children and Nature Network, which is one of the city's Connecting Children to Nature Initiative lead organizations, along with our partners at the National League of Cities. Schools play an ever-growing role in community life. They are a key part of most families' day-to-day experience, and in many cases, the only nearby public outdoor space accessible to residents. In addition, as public spaces, schoolyards are an untapped opportunity to address climate resilience and access to nature. And likely for most of us, this year more than others has highlighted why we all need our vitamin N, whether we are adults or children. And through the CCCN initiative and our newly launched Green Schoolyards Technical Assistance Program, we're working with cities and school districts to transform asphalt schoolyards into safe, nature-filled outdoor spaces that benefit students, the community, and the local environment. As one of the largest landowners in their district or city, a school system's land management has a really large impact on local infrastructure and the environment. And as public lands, schoolyards really stand to benefit from the stewardship by current and future cores in construction and maintenance of these valuable spaces, and a deepened relationship with the young people they serve. This is perhaps a newer topic in the field for cores, but I think in the field we already do have examples of ways where cores have advocated successfully to be a key workforce for other nature projects with broad benefits. Some of the examples that came to mind for us include stream restoration through bioengineering for habitat and erosion reduction, tree planting to reduce urban heat islands and increase canopy, wildland fire fuel reduction, just to name a few. So again, I'm really thrilled that we have the chance to be with you today and further explore the intersection and hopefully today broaden the intersection and our understanding of the intersection between the work that cores do and the opportunities as we seek to expand green schoolyards across the nation. To kick us off, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Vera at the National League of Cities to provide a little more context about CCCN.
Thank you, Priya. I'm delighted to be here with you all today, and I'm going to give an overview of the city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative. And I'm a senior program specialist with the initiative, and I work for the National League of Cities. And CCCN is a partnership between the National League of Cities and the Children in Nature Network, and it is generously supported by the JPB Foundation. And launched in 2015, we now work with 18 cities to advance strategies to connect children to nature more equitably. And here's a map of the 18 cities. We'll actually be expanding soon, and we'll talk more about our new Green Schoolyards cohort. But we see nature access as key for racial equity, and we know that access to nature is not equitably distributed to residents in cities, and that communities of color have been disproportionately affected by nature deficit. And our initiative offers technical assistance, grants, resources, and other peer learning opportunities for cities and their partners. Next slide, please. And for our goals and approach, we focus on systems level change, meaning that the cities plan and implement strategies to focus on shifting the conditions that hold the problem of inequitable nature connection in place. And on the right, you'll see the framework for the 6 conditions of systems change that we've adapted from FSG Consulting. So as cities develop strategies, which include green schoolyards, early childhood nature play, and nature smart libraries, they focus on the conditions that need to be shifted in order for children to experience more equitable connections to nature. So this can include the policies, resource flows, the relationships, connections, and mental models. And we also see it as key to engage elected leaders to connect nature access to their city priorities and to integrate equitable nature access across city agencies and operations. And we have a number of resources available to everyone that we'll share out. We have a city's resource hub, which includes a number of documents and tools, including tools for making the case, planning and evaluation guides. We also have a strategy tool on city and core partnerships, and also a number of tools related to systems change. We also have a newsletter available for which you could sign up for. And as I mentioned, CCCN is growing, so we hope to double the number of cities from 18 to 36 by 2024. And we're about to launch a new Green Schoolyards cohort, and we'll soon be launching, or in the next year or so, an early childhood cohort and also a third to be determined strategy cohort. So please contact our team if you'd like to learn more about the initiative. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jaime Zaplatosch, who's the Director of Green Schoolyards for Healthy Communities at the Children in Nature Network.
Thank you, Vera. So many people, before we go any further, we want to make sure that everyone has a good sense of what green schoolyards are. Many people think about a green schoolyard and they think about a school garden and they're like, yep, that's great. But when we're talking about green schoolyards, we're talking about so much more than that. And I'll go into a definition in a moment. But what we will do first is kind of give you a little bit of a view of what green schoolyards look like across the country right now. Next slide, please. But first, I'll talk about our vision for 2050. We, along with over 100 other organizations around, actually international organizations, have signed on and co-created a whole agenda of how to realize this vision that all U.S. communities will have access to green schoolyards by 2050 to enhance children's healthy development, community well-being, and positive environmental impacts. We really see that green schoolyards are a lever for systems change. Like Vera was talking about, if you just imagine wherever you live, schools are typically part of centers of communities, considered really safe spaces that people go to, and especially kids, on a pretty regular basis, depending on what the amenities are and whether or not we're in a pandemic. But if you think about the opportunity of schoolyards acting as parks and extensions of the classroom throughout a city, wherever you're working or living, or throughout any size community, thinking about those spaces becoming a fabric of life and positive quality of life for residents and ourselves. Next slide, please. So this is a before picture that you'll actually hear a little bit more about this program, or you will hear more about this program from Daniella Pereira with Space to Grow. This is a before picture from the south side of Chicago and really is pretty indicative of what schoolyards look like across the country. In some places, like Austin, and you'll be able to see a little bit of that as well. The schoolyards start out as grass and have at least some green in them, but the majority of schoolyards across the country look more like what you see on this picture. There's really a lot of asphalt, maybe a piece of playground equipment, and the only green is on the exterior of the schoolyard. So on the other side of the fence where kids can't get to during the school day, and it's just completely isolated. And there's a lot of complications with having schoolyards that look like this, including, what can be done outside, and urban heat island effect, lots of flooding and standing water. There's a lot of costs to school districts, and they really could be much more than what we're seeing right here. So next slide, please. This is an after picture of that same schoolyard, an aerial photo, pretty new or pretty early on after its installation, but you're seeing a schoolyard that has been designed by the school community to act as, it plays so many roles in the community. To the left, which is kind of cut off from the picture just because of the sizing, there is a large resurfaced asphalt area that acts as a track. So it's still asphalt, but it allows track and walking in circles, at least on the schoolyard, is something that the school was interested in, the school community. There's sports fields. There are age-appropriate playground equipment in this picture. There's outdoor classroom seating. There's vegetable gardens. There are native gardens, a lot of stormwater capture happening. All of this is collecting stormwater, and which you're going to hear about all three of the case studies that are coming up as well. It's really, I think, one of the biggest ways that cores can work together with green schoolyards is these designing and maintaining these spaces. Native gardens and trees have all been planted in this space. Next slide, please. So you can imagine that between the before and after picture, there's a lot of benefits for green schoolyards. And so many, if we talk about decrease in urban heat island, capturing stormwater, presenting outdoor learning opportunities, and a variable amount of play spaces, this benefits wheel really sums up what our researchers and the research that we have in our Children in Nature Network Research Hub talks about what these benefits are for Green Schoolyards. And I know I'm almost positive that you're going to get a copy of the slide deck because I'm realizing how small this visual looks on the screen, but it's really a great way to think about all the partners who can be engaged in all of the multi-solving benefits and approaches for Green Schoolyards. Next slide, please. I guess the definition isn't on here. I'm sorry, I think I must have skipped that slide somehow. But when thinking about Green Schoolyards, I will go into the definition, although that after photo really gave a good illustration that Green Schoolyards ideally are designed for and by the entire school community. And that includes parents, administrators, teachers, staff, community members that don't even have anybody going to the school, and students, and really thinking about how these spaces can serve all of those community members in a holistic design. And the features that it sounds like the definition sign is next. Or are we saying that, Tyler? If we go to the next slide? No. Okay, we'll go back. There we go. But there's a lot of features, not just school gardens as part of Green Schoolyards. When thinking about a whole program, so all of our cities that we're going to mention coming up about new cities in our technical assistance cohort, there's so many components to engagement in developing a Green Schoolyards program. And these are many of the different ways that cores could get involved, including what we're hoping in this next phase is that one of you that are participating right now finds a city that's listed or a city that's presenting today, and you see alignment and might be able to help from start to finish, even create a Green Schoolyards program if it doesn't exist already, or integrate into an existing one. Next slide, please. So here's a list of all of those partners that have been traditionally engaged in Green Schoolyards, and you're going to hear all of this illustrated by the next three presenters in the case studies around their particular Green Schoolyard programs. Next slide, please. And here we go. Vera's coming back to give you a little bit more.
Thank you, Jaime. I'm just delighted that we have three representatives from cities and school districts that have Green Schoolyards programs. The cities we have are Chicago, Austin, and Philadelphia. And the representatives will talk about why they develop Green Schoolyards, their design process, and how they're engaging the community and using the Green Schoolyards and what's needed for maintenance. And today we have Daniella Pereira, who's the Vice President of Community Conservation for Openlands and is based in Chicago. Melody Alcazar, who's the Program Coordinator for the city's Connecting Children to Nature Initiative in Austin and is based in the Parks and Recreation Department. And Melvin, the Green Infrastructure Program Manager for the the school district of Philadelphia. And first we have Daniella.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with you all this afternoon. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So I only have 5 minutes. I'm sorry that I have to rush it, but I think you'll get the gist of most of this. Next slide, please. So I'm here to talk about Chicago's Green Schoolyards program, Space to Grow. Next slide. You know, access to healthy green space in Chicago is not equitable. 10% of the city's population doesn't live within a half-mile of a park, and we have half the number of playgrounds recommended for a population of our size. In some cases, crime can limit access to what park space is available, and those most affected by the lack of parks are in the lowest quarter of median household income. Next slide, please. At the same time, Chicago Public Schools is one of the largest public owners of pavement in this city. Many schools lack playgrounds, like Jaime said, or green space altogether, or schoolyards were left to disrepair or were paved to create parking lots when recess was phased out decades ago. And that's right, recess phased out decades ago. Could you imagine that? This has left the majority of the city's schools without adequate facilities for outdoor recess and physical education programs. Next slide. So what has come to be is an intersection of inadequate green space and parks affecting students of color in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. Next slide. More than a decade ago, Openlands began to work with Chicago Public Schools to build school gardens to give students and teachers access to green space and outdoor labs. At the same time, Healthy Schools campaign, who is our co-partner in managing this, advocated to reinstate recess and physical education policy at schools. This provided an exceptional opportunity to partner and invest in green schoolyards. Next slide, please. At the same time, both the Department of Water Management and Metropolitan Water Reclamation District have federal mandates to use green stormwater infrastructure to get water into the ground and out of the sewers during peak rain times. And so Space to Grow was born in 2013. As co-managers, Openlands and Healthy Schools campaign work with the partners and the school communities to ensure the success of the program. And then the capital partners, as you see here, are the public agencies who provide the leadership, the expertise, and the funding. Next slide. Space to Grow, this is what Jaime showed you earlier. Space to Grow transforms underutilized asphalt schoolyards into spaces that provide students, their families, and the community with safe, shared green space for outdoor learning and active play, while also using green stormwater infrastructure to reduce flooding in under-resourced communities in Chicago. Next slide. The Space to Grow process engages parents and community members so that they can take ownership and really develop the schoolyard that they want. It also engages parent leaders at each school and connects teachers with professional development to learn and understand how to bring classroom learning outside. Next slide. Chicago Public Schools has intergovernmental agreements with the two water partners and contracts with the designers to use the community's ideas for their design. So this is a different school. This is Davis. Next slide, please. Students then participate in planting days and ongoing learning within those spaces. Next slide. Plus, the schoolyards provide a welcoming space for community activity after school hours. It's great to have increased green space to foster community cohesion and connection with a new neighborhood park. Next slide, please. These shared spaces are managed by garden teams and maintenance contracts through Chicago Public Schools. One of the measures of success for us is to make sure that these spaces are maintained and that the plants establish and flourish, and that the other green infrastructure is capturing water where it falls. We'll get to discussion on maintenance later in this panel. Next slide, please. The schoolyards are designed to capture at least 150,000 gallons of stormwater per rain event. So the gardens and materials soak it up right where it falls, which helps filter out those pollutants, and then slowly releases this over time into the sewer system. Next slide. For the community, this means less basement flooding with sewer backups, and ultimately cleaner water for our rivers and Lake Michigan. Next slide. This is the before and after design of what I had shown earlier from the designer. This is Davis School. Next slide. And our research partners have produced data that show that Space to Grow schoolyards are having a positive impact on students, schools, and communities with more active play, more positive social interaction, less bullying, and more increased community cohesion. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Melody Alcazar, and I coordinate the CCCN initiative here in Austin. I'm housed in the Parks and Rec department in the planning division. Next slide. So I'll go into a little bit of detail. You heard how Chicago is managed. Austin is very different, and so you'll get a different perspective. But I think this picture really illustrates a good example of how we would like to use core groups moving forward. This is an example of a nature play feature that was installed at our second pilot Green School Park at Wooldridge Elementary. And we've had core staff trained on installing these types of features. And so this is just one of the types of features that could go in that we would like to see core get involved with us. Next slide. So Austin was one of the pilot CCCN cities, and we've had Green School Parks as one of our strategies, since our inception. You can see we've got actually 5 total strategies. The key players for our Green School Park initiative is obviously the city of Austin through our Parks Department, our school district, and then we've got lots and lots of different either program or community-based partners. There's a dashed line that kind of connects our parks and our schools, and that's because we have 22 joint use sites throughout the city. And so those school grounds are school during the school day, and then during non-school hours, they become public park spaces and are managed and treated as such. And so this is really where we have started our initiative and our efforts within Austin. Next slide. We had a couple of things early on that our CCCN group really put their energy in to help us kind of frame how we would approach CCCN in Austin. One of those was creating this nature equity map, which you can see pictured. And so it identifies areas within Austin that are what we consider to be nature deficient. And so it combines things like park access, quality of park, distance to park spaces, tree canopy, presence of children in the area, et cetera, and lumps it all together. And so you can see the darker areas of town are what we would consider nature deficient. And so this is really for Green School Parks where we have focused a lot of our initial energies. The second big thing that has helped us through our Green School Park program is for Austin's purposes. Jaime mentioned a definition. We have defined both Green Schoolyards and Green School Parks so that our city has a better understanding on what we're hoping to achieve. This was actually done a couple of years into us having the Green School Park strategy. And it was because I initially were really focused on those joint use sites. I'll get into why that's changing moving forward. But by expanding kind of this definition, we have allowed ourselves to open up to try and work with all of the Austin ISD schools because we no longer have this joint use qualification. And you can see that basically we're really just looking at, do you have kind of features and are they used? And then to become a Green School Park, are you opening that space up to the community during that out of school time? Joint use sites are already automatically like that, which for us is why the city can come in and work in those spaces. But for us to kind of look at how to grow the program, this was one of the ways we were able to do that. Next slide. So in addition to the CCCN efforts, there's a lot on our school district side that's been kind of in the works the last decade or so that has helped us create this Green School Park initiative within Austin. The first of those is this ESAC, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, and they are an advisory committee to the school board regarding things like curriculum, sustainability guidelines. They look at everything from kind of zero waste practices to transportation efficiencies to defining outdoor learning spaces. And because that group is already in place, there's a lot of work that they've been doing around requirements at the school district level as it relates to outdoor learning and outdoor spaces. Part of the two things that group has really focused their energies on the last couple of years are these educational specifications. Those are basically standards for the way educational facilities have to be designed and built, and it includes a lot of requirements around outdoor learning. Tied to that is that project development manual, which basically goes over the construction details for things like that. So that's really where the that committee has focused their energies. And because they're starting to get some of that as a requirement at the district level, it's made our job a lot easier to come in with this Green School Park strategy and start to implement some of these things. There are two folks within the school district that we work very closely with, and that's the sustainability coordinator, who's housed under operations and maintenance, and then an outdoor learning specialist who is housed in academics. And so we've got folks coming from both the maintenance and the academic side of things. And I think having people in those key roles has really allowed this partnership to grow and expand because we're getting voices at kind of the key tables for AISD, for our school district. It just makes those conversations a lot easier to have kind of your point person for that. So, and then last but not least, the school district does a lot around curriculum. They actually provide our teachers with some curriculum, some of which is required for them to use. And within that, there is actually this little outdoor connection icon. And so it talks about how teachers can take lessons, the exact same lesson you would do inside, and how you would translate that to an outdoor environment. So again, all of these things have really laid the groundwork for us to come in and help then those joint use sites initially to transform their campuses. Next slide. So initially, we approached this strategy through kind of traditional idea of, all of this community engagement with the school and the surrounding community, using that information to fund, design, and build these spaces. And then once all of that stuff is in, we activate it through, weekend programming with our partners, professional learning for the teachers, et cetera. And our 3 pilot sites were selected based on that nature equity map that you guys showed, that you saw initially. We have 2 schools that have gone in this way, both Barrington and Wooldridge Elementary. We have a 3rd, Sanchez, which is in the process of design, so kind of that middle tier, and should get installed this summer. Next slide. I love this graphic because it shows all of the partners that are involved. Jaime kind of alluded to this in one of her slides as well. So this is Wooldridge Green School Park, and while myself as the coordinator kind of pulling these people together, I am not the only person that is involved in these projects. From our point of view, we're working with the watershed department to do a lot of GSI work. They, for this campus, extended a fence line so that students would have access to a natural creek that was on that space that was previously inaccessible. They've added in rain barrels and cisterns. They've done some kind of berm and swale work with creating rain gardens to try and help capture a lot of the runoff that's coming from the building itself. We're working with obviously our Parks and Rec department to do things like trash maintenance and picnic tables and making sure those general park amenities are up to standards. Our other maintenance or operation teams focus on maintenance of kind of the track spaces or sports courts. All of our joint use sites are, of course, different. They are not all managed the same way. They do not all have all the same features. And so it's just a lot of different groups trying to pull them together, get everyone on the same page, figure out how to pay for it all. We are not tied to bond money or anything like that, the way that Chicago is. And so we're working with each of these individual departments to try and figure out how to fund all of these different pieces. Next slide. So we did our first 3 schools in a very specific way. About a year and a half ago, decided that, well, that was great. And those features that were installed in those campuses are providing fantastic ecosystem services to that school and that community. The culture change that we had hoped to see on that site wasn't happening. And so the champion teachers were still the champion teachers. The neighborhood was still using the community space in the same way. That aspect hadn't changed. And so instead of selecting another campus to move forward, we took a step back and did a very thorough assessment of all of our joint use sites to figure out what kind of eco features were present, the quality, quantity, how the principal wanted to see that space used, if they were doing professional learning with the teachers already, how the community was already using that space, and basically have lumped all of this data together and have presented that back out to some of those key departments that you saw on the last slide, and are developing kind of a 10-year timeline to bring all of our joint use sites up to becoming a green school park over the next 10 years, because they don't all need the same thing. Some only need professional learning, some only need trees, some need kind of a combination. And so just kind of shifting how we are moving forward with the idea of expanding how many campuses we'll be able to reach in a shorter time frame. And that is it for me.
Hi, I'm Emma Melvin. I'm the Green Infrastructure Program Manager with the School District of Philadelphia. I'm going to talk about the Greening Schoolyards program at the school district. But before I start, I want to give you like a sense of place of Philadelphia. We are the 6th most populated city in the U.S. With about 1.6 million residents and around 200,000 students that go to our school district schools. Now we have 330-ish schools. 300 of them are managed and run by the school district. We have a very robust charter school. About 30 of them are charter schools that the school district provides some sort of management and maintenance of the buildings and the school campuses. We also are not so proud of this. We are the poorest of the big cities. And so we struggle with how to provide funding, capacity, and capital to transform our schoolyards to provide a better learning space and better atmosphere for the community. So next slide. So we have been working on this with the Philadelphia Water Department for about 15 years. They kicked off a program called Green Cities Clean Water, and that's really to reduce the combined sewer overflows within the city's waterways. And as one of the largest landowners in Philadelphia, we are one of the first partners and a really smart partner, because we had a lot of schoolyards that look like the picture on the left, large parking lots that weren't really providing the multiple benefits a schoolyard can provide, bringing learning outside, providing exercise space, providing green space, quiet space, learning activities. So we have been working with the Philadelphia Water Department over the years to transform these spaces with lots of other partners. And I can't express how important the partners are for the school district of Philadelphia. Again, we are the poorest of the largest cities, so capital and funding is a real struggle for the school district and capacity to do these transformations. We have partnered with the Trust for Public Lands over the years to transform many schoolyards into something that serves both the students, the teachers, the communities much more robustly than this parking lot. But we also have many other partners. We have home and schools, we have parents associations, community groups, we have gardening programs, we have environmentally focused community programs. We have partners that focus on bringing the learning out to the schoolyard, Fairmount Waterworks, lots and lots of partners that also provide funding for these foundations such as William Penn Foundation, Eagles Foundation that helps us provide active spaces. So we have so many other organizations, including the water department, that actually funds these transformations. And not just the community partners, but the parents and the community members and the students that engage in the process. We even partner with Mural Arts Program to take art and community engagement and help develop these spaces. Next slide. And our Green Schoolyards is really for all. It includes stormwater management as one of our main funding apparatuses to transform these schoolyards, but also flower beds, vegetable beds, trees, fruiting trees. We have a great partner in the Philadelphia Orchard, project that provides, sorry guys, provides fruiting trees and shrubs and brings learning into the schools. We have porous play surfaces, artificial turf, lots of play equipment, and we embarked on a very fun and needed project this year with one of our partners called the Community Design Collaborative, where they worked with partners, engineer firms and design firms to create outdoor classrooms, which the parents, teachers, and community members can build and install in their schoolyard. Next slide. As I mentioned, am the Green Infrastructure Program Manager, and I oversee actually the maintenance component of the Green Schoolyards. Many of these schoolyards have a robust stormwater management component. Some of that is voluntary, some of that was regulatory. And so as part of that regulatory component, we have post-construction stormwater management plans that require us to maintain the above ground and below ground system components. So that includes kind of the rain gardens, but also the pipes and catch basins. Partnered with that, we also, as a city, we have to pay a stormwater fee, both residential and commercial. Residents have to pay this stormwater fee along with our water bills and our sewer bills. But in putting in this green infrastructure, we get a stormwater fee credit. And that requires, again, maintenance and inspection. And the Philadelphia Water Department comes out every 3 years and inspects our sites to make sure that they are functioning as designed and that they're being maintained. And so as part of that requirement, the school district created a stormwater management maintenance contract. And what we did was we went out and did assessments, we did site restoration, and we created a routine maintenance schedule. Next slide. And so the benefits of green schoolyards is so robust. And so the need for them is great, but also these systems grow and they need care. I can't. They need vegetation maintenance that everyone thinks about, weeding and pruning, but also litter cleanup and a lot of those other, this is an infrastructure just as the roof and the sewer, the ventilation systems, are all an infrastructure. So they need continual maintenance. We clean out the structures, we repair the outlets, the pipes, we fix the fences, do maintenance on our pavement, porous and conventional, our safety services. So this is a functional system that we do continual maintenance on. That's part of our ever expanding site. So this year we are adding on 6 new green schoolyards. 3 of them are through the partnership with the Trust for Public Lands, and 3 we're spearheading on our own through funding from the William Penn Foundation. Next year, we have another 4 sites coming online. So we're constantly expanding our green schoolyards, and we're constantly needing maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma and Daniella and Melody. That was great. And I hope that provided a wonderful lens for everyone who's watching on just how green schoolyards can look different in different communities. And Emma, special shout out to your very sweet off-screen assistant. We always try very hard to recruit young people onto our panels. So it wouldn't have been the same without her. So this map here, I'll just briefly want to share. I know, James, you had asked a question about how do we get involved and start something like this in our own community. Hopefully there's many of you whose wheels are turning about how do we get our core programs engaged with this too. And so this map shows the 27 or 26 cities that just applied for Green Schoolyards Technical Assistance with us. These are cities interested in advancing a program where they are and have formed partnerships between their city and school district. And so we will share our contact information. If you are located in any of these places and would want to connect with that team, we would be really happy to facilitate that. So please reach out to us with the information that's shared later on. And that also goes for the network of cities that Vera shared in her slides as well, which includes our first two groups of cities that we've worked with as part of CCCN. So without further ado, we definitely want to shift into talking more about the intersection of everything you just heard about with cores. And while you chat in your additional questions, I want to put to the panel the first one, and the first most critical one for today's discussion, which is, describe for us what your recent experience has been in considering cores in your Green Schoolyards programs. And I guess we can, if everyone wants to answer that, we can just kind of go down the line. Emma, do you want to start?
Sure. It's interesting because Philadelphia actually has a great program called PowerCore that is working with the city on maintaining green infrastructure. So we have a leg up in the sense that we already have a robust training program that is feeding a lot of our landscape contractors to do this work. PowerCore actually was one of our applicants. So sorry we couldn't pick you, but we had lots of different requirements for our contract. But we would love to see continued engagement with PowerCore or other groups, other core groups interested in our work. We're up for another request for proposals for the next 3 years, in actually a couple of months, like about 6 months. So there's always opportunity to work with school districts to maintain these sites. Planting, litter pickup, maintenance. PowerCore does pretty much everything. So they even do, I think, subsurface maintenance work too.
Thanks. In Chicago, it's a little more complex in that there's so much more red tape around all the contracts for the maintenance. Right now, so Chicago Public Schools is in charge of the maintenance of each of these sites. They do contracts every approximately 5 years with a different company. Since we are one of the largest school districts, they need to, they farm a lot of this out, and then the contractors find subcontractors. And what we've seen is a lot of difficulty in people understanding how to take care of systems that include green infrastructure, that include native plants and gardens. And fortunately, we have a great partnership with CPS where we've been discussing how to get people involved in there that are able to do this. And so we have asked a local group here, a core group called Green Core. The issue with Green Core, though, is that some of the candidates or people in the Green Core program are coming from the justice system. A few years ago, CPS put down, some stuff where volunteers all have to, depending on their level, have to sometimes be fingerprinted, have to have access by, the principal. So it just makes it a little more complex, even though we could pool in Green Core with the people who maybe don't have records to access those spaces. It's just a lot of policy changing. Fortunately, right now, they are looking for new contractors. So I did reach out to Student Conservation Association too, who are really big in Chicago. and asked, would they be willing? Are they interested in this? So they are on the list right now, but then they also have to become, certified vendors with the city. So it'll take a little bit of time.
So here in Austin, our Parks Department already has a contract with our Texas Conservation Corps. And so they do a lot of work around our park system, managing trails and putting in new trails, raising tree canopy, things like that. We just started exploring what a relationship with Corps might be before COVID hit. And so we actually had them slated to install 3 different nature play spaces in our park system, and then COVID happened and everything changed. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to revisit that moving forward. I would say a lot of the work that we need help with is on the front end of procuring like large logs and tree stumps and tree cookies. And so we've expressed to our regional core that while they're taking things down, if they could just keep an eye out for things, are they able to move it to a central location? Can they cut tree cookies for us? So trying to add it into some work that they're already doing seems like it might be a really good possibility. In terms of maintenance, that I think similar to what Daniella was speaking to, gets a little tricky anytime that you're working with the school. And so, we would just want to explore what those types of relationships might be. I will say that our school district just approved a kind of a separate maintenance team for all of the new bond projects that are happening, specific to some of this outdoor learning infrastructure. And so that would be a combination of trees and GSI and outdoor classrooms, kind of you name it. And so I think that there's real opportunity there to figure out, what our regional core makes sense to be kind of that contractor that's helping the school district out with that.
Thank you, Melody. And it's great to see all the folks in the comments naming all the places you're watching from, and it's good to know that you're out there. And Leslie had a comment that utilizing AmeriCorps members through the Core Network member corps may be a good option, since they first have to pass a rigorous criminal history check prior to enrollment. So thanks for that thought, Leslie. There's another question here about, and I actually would put this to everyone and not just our panelists, which is how does and could federal funding help support projects like this? I think there's certain, especially given what Mary Ellen was sharing about recent legislation and activity and advocacy for infrastructure and cores and but it might be that the federal funding that this panel is most dialed into might overlap with, but not be exactly the same as what cores are most familiar with. So I'd love to hear from the panel, and also love to hear in the comments from those of you watching.
So I do know that in the American Recovery Plan, there's funding for local education associations, which is mostly state education departments, to use that funding for outdoor learning spaces. And so we know that that was in a COVID package, but then in the infrastructure bill, there's also school grounds are also part of what the bonds and grants are eligible for, depending on what each school needs and how that money all gets funneled down. But it's definitely that those resources are out there, and they're not enough. I know that an advocacy group that we're working with is saying that those numbers are really, really low in terms of what schools need to actually modernize. So we still have some work to do, even in the great new proposal that for the first time ever includes schools as part of a federal infrastructure package, which is a big win.
Does anyone else on the panel want to chime in? If not, I think we have time for maybe one more question. And there, one of the things, especially those of us who've had the fortune to see both the opportunities for Green Schoolyards and core programs, is you know, there's this conversation that seems to happen in a lot of districts when they're getting started. Who's going to maintain this in the summer when school's out? And it's like, oh, who does a lot of work in the summer that I know of? And there's some like natural symbiosis there. And so I was wondering if Daniella and Melody and Emma, if you could talk a little bit about the long-term maintenance issues that Green Schoolyards face, because I think, you know, that hits on some of the areas in which cores could really play a role.
I'll start out. Similar to what Emma had showed in her program, you know, things over time fall apart, right? You know, you have plants in there, you get weeds in there, you get garbage in some of that area. You know, structurally things start falling apart. And I think it is about, you know, getting people's perspective in these schoolyards to really start understanding that this is a huge change from an asphalt parking lot. I think people are very used to, like, you know, maybe plowing the snow, salting it, and that's it. Whenever they start adding anything else, there is always a maintenance need. And so some of these asphalted schoolyards have been like that for 30 years. So people just don't have the real strong connection to how to do that maintenance work. But I think that, you know, if you start looking, Jobs for Futures Fund, they are really looking at green infrastructure being the up and coming like job. And a huge part of that is arboriculture, really taking care of trees. And, you know, mixed in, I would say, even with some federal funding, are potential for more registered apprenticeships around the country. And so some of those are really starting up in arboriculture, but maybe there should be a Green Schoolyards one on the maintenance. WEF, the Water Environmental Federation, does a lot of this training too for cores. And I agree, summertime is a great opportunity, even if you're only there for 6 to 10 weeks, to be able to start getting that experience.
And when we talk about maintenance, remember, like, so we think, well, we'll weed and do all this stuff. Now, there are hundreds of kids in these schoolyards, and it's not just about kind of tidying up your garden in your backyard, but kids, they play in these spaces, and they bang, and they interact, and they run, and they bend. And I am a proponent of every one of those aspects. But that is something that we need to work with, both kind of creating an engagement strategy with students and community members about how to engage positively within these systems. And a lot of programs that provide stewardship activities for communities and community members and students, where they actually plan and tend and they learn these systems in the outdoor lab, really make a positive impact on maintenance. Because I love to see the kids in there and being tactile and digging and smushing and all the great things they do. But in the maintenance realm, it does take a toll on the systems. Part of my work is I create a feedback loop to the design team about what handled all that great activity and what didn't, and what is the appropriate plant palette, and how should we change our design standards for these systems and for these schoolyards, and should we change how we allow movement through them. But it is a great way to kind of get people exposed, get students exposed, and kind of direct them on appropriate interaction. I think the cores are a great tool to do that, because they can come in and do stewardship days and do community days and kind of engage the right people at the right time. We struggle, not even just with students, but we struggle with our own staff understanding these systems. So it's a learning curve for everyone. So engagement is a powerful tool.
Well, thank you so much again to Daniella and Melody and Emma for joining us from your respective cities and helping us start and deepen a conversation here. And we look forward to hearing from many of you who are watching about the specific cities you've mentioned in the comments. Please email us. We'd love to connect you with other folks who are working on Green Schoolyard strategies and might be looking for your help.
What a great town hall, and thank you so much for the Cities Connecting Children to Nature team and the city representatives for joining us today and sharing their perspectives on green schoolyards. It looks like there are a ton of opportunities for COREs to be involved in this kind of project. As we continue our conversations about the future of core work and infrastructure in the US, we hope to see more CORes engaging with school districts on developing, maintaining, and organizing programs for green schoolyards. I'd like to invite you to join us for future town hall events right here on the Core Network's YouTube page. Next week, April 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the town hall will be on the Bridge Project, an equitable hiring pathway for the environmental sector. This would be a great session for core staff, core members, and core alumni. Later this month, we'll have town halls on lessons learned from our 2020 projects of the year. April 22nd will be the California Conservation Corps talking about wildfire response. And May 6th will be Power Corps PHL's Memorial Grove discussion. Finally, make sure you like and subscribe to the Core Network YouTube channel right underneath the slides that you're seeing on your screen, and click the bell to be notified of future town hall live streams. Thanks again for joining us.